Hey there! Welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. I know some of y'all will have a question about this. Wait till the end of the video, I'll explain. But we got a big album to discuss. The newest project from Ariana Grande, Eternal Sunshine. I don't think I'm the only one who's had a bit of a bad feeling about this release. Now granted, some can argue at this stage of her career, Ariana Grande's got nothing left to prove. And while positions may have underperformed compared to Thank You Next, I'm willing to accept some mitigating circumstantial factors, like one of the worst possible weeks in 2020 to drop, an album that was by necessity more of an R&B slow burn, and true to form, a woefully uneven choice of singles. Nasty and Off the Table with The Weeknd were right goddamn there, come on! But there are some messier factors heading into this release. Aside from the fact that she'd be working uphill without TikTok promo thanks to being on Republic, which rolls up under Universal, the buzz around her divorce and new relationship as reported subject matter for this album had a different feel, especially compared to when she had mined personal drama for more tangible success before, notably because the framing felt a bit off. Yes, and being a weak single didn't really help matters with a video that was calling out the critics. It just didn't feel all that accurate to the circumstances. But poor single choices have been emblematic of her whole career. This looked to be a very short, breezy affair, although I did find it a little dubious to evoke callbacks to Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind for the nuanced breakup album, given Jhené Aiko already did that for Sold Out 10 years ago, and it's one of the best R&B records of the 2010s, so where would this fall? So let me put this gently for I think everyone's sake. I think Ariana Grande delivered an album that she thinks will satiate controversy and expectations without really having a firm grasp on either, which is why the album feels so smooth, streamlined, and efficient. It's targeted to handle what she or her handlers think is the issue, but it's also left a lot of folks really frustrated because after nearly 4 years, it is the sound of music maybe being the last thing on her mind. Now, I think there are more nuanced elements of this album that I've been looking for Ariana Grande to deliver for some time now, even if I think by extension the execution's been somewhat mishandled. But there is one thing I want to establish right from the jump. I'm not one to get into an artist's personal, behind-the-scenes drama in order to legislate an album. This is not a call-out or a defense or a tea video. Artists are allowed to write fictionalized versions of their relationships and breakups, and the truth is that, especially in cases where cheating is alleged, nobody will ever have the full scope of the entire story. And I think there's a certain level of entitlement to some celebrity watching and speculating that's more than a little puritanical and really kind of gross. It's gonna be mentioned in passing because it is the very obvious subtext behind this album, but it's not gonna make or break this project one way or the other for me. You got that? But okay. I think the first step here is actually trying to meet Ariana Grande where she is, rather than where someone might want her to be. And the first thing you will notice is a change in her performance. The vocal runs are more restrained, her diction is leaps and bounds better, but there's also this lingering feeling that she's holding back the hardest emotions. I mean, she could luxuriate in the mess and melodrama of previous projects, especially Thank You Next, whereas here you can tell the emotions are more conflicted and complex. And that makes sense when you're actually dealing with a divorce and it doesn't fall out easy, something that a younger audience who might be less experienced in these sorts of relationships might not understand. Now that is a double-edged sword. You can argue that Ariana Grande as a performer, she's most effective as a belter who can command a huge mix. It's one of the reasons that some of the best moments on Sweetener were so effective. And this album necessarily is playing to a smaller scale. You're not gonna get anthems all this time. It's trying to be more complicated. And those layers are set up early. The relationship spark has sputtered out. It consistently doesn't feel right with all the fights and then trying to make up and then make it work. It's not clicking. There may or may not have been cheating involved. The title track seems to imply it, or at the very least that her ex found someone else very quickly in a similar way that she may have. And this is where things get muddy because Some will say that she's playing into the homewrecker narrative before and point to songs like Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored. You know, what I'd argue is the absolute worst song in her entire catalog and the worst possible conclusion of Thank You Next. It drags down that entire album, but it also misses an important factor as to why. Ariana Grande is really bad at playing the bad girl, which has been consistent kind of her entire career. I mean, it's one of the reasons, paradoxically, that I've always liked the song Dangerous Woman. If you go into that track and think that she's not at all convincing as a femme fatale, yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's never been the point. It makes her feel like a dangerous woman. The fantasy and transgression is what gives it any edge. Now, incidentally, I don't consider the vast majority of her sex songs that frame her as the bad girl either. That's playing into the Madonna horror complex and a very specific Americanized purity culture that I refuse to dignify for being sex negative with a long tradition of misogyny. What do you know, there's a whole lot of it on TikTok and social media to this day. Although what can be interesting about Ariana Grande is how much she may have internalized that narrative. The lingering Italian Catholic upbringing cannot have helped either. That moral sense probably has some impact on her life. Now, one thing I will give Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored is that it gets to the tedious side of being needlessly cruel, but Eternal Sunshine isn't trying to be needlessly cruel. If anything, the reality of loving and being married to someone in a long-term relationship is that you get to see all their flaws and failings in plain view, alongside the reality and lingering good emotions that you have. It's how you get songs like I Wish I Hated You, one of the best on the album. And when you remember that Ariana Grande's parents divorced, and there has been that running media narrative that she's dated extensively and has been framed as a homewrecker, fairly or not, she desperately wants this to work. There's literally a song on this album called Don't Wanna Break Up Again. She's really trying. Indeed, one thing that Eternal Sunshine really exposes is just how fragile one's sense of self can be in the throes of a bad breakup, and the media narrative that's telling you who you are. Which is why on True Story she says, you know what, she'll be the villain. She'll be the bad guy. She'll be good at it for that part, if for the ex or the world at large, as she implies on We Can't Be Friends. And when in an interview she admits that True Story, it's all untrue based on untrue events, she's trying to make someone else feel better, I mean, I believe it. She's not convincing playing the bad girl. She never has been. Of course, while the considerable majority of this album is around that breakup, a lot of the media noise and the social media discourse has surrounded the new love side of her connection, where the narrative is shakier. Now, there is emotional truth that is here. Imperfect for You touches on this, the reality of a passionate rebound from an imploding relationship where you do reckless or stupid shit as you feel like damaged goods. Supernatural touches on this too, one of the best on the album. But it does look a certain type of way to deliberately make a callback to Brandy and Monica's chart-topping feud with The Boy Is Mine that wants to be salacious but feels kind of deflective, which is why the imperious yes and directly following it is such an eye-roll gesture. I mean, what's frustrating is that Ariana Grande is not even wrong. I don't think it's anyone's business whose dick she's riding. Social media playing the form of paparazzi speculating on her relationships, it's tacky and gross, but the introspection into that new relationship and what it now means for her, it's not really at the same level compared to what was around the divorce. Now, this is where I feel the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind illusion was done a lot better by Jhené Aiko and Sold Out, because for her, it followed the breaking of bad patterns and explored why she was so tentative approaching new relationships given how relatively stable she was. Hell, not for nothing, there's no shortage of country albums by women exploring the messy aftermath of a divorce that they have to weather, with the immediate comparisons coming to my mind being The Weight of These Wings by Miranda Lambert in 2016, where she very much did cheat on Blake Shelton and then explored the meandering, lonely thought processes as to why she did, shouldering that blame, or Rolling Up the Welcome Mat by Kelsey Ballerini from just last year, where they had very different expectations in the relationship and it fell apart in dramatic, public fashion. And what I think it reveals is that Ariana Grande probably didn't really give herself the time to be alone and single with her emotions, beyond a fleeting astrology interlude and a really wise moment of counsel from her grandmother on what works in relationships on the closing track. And that feels revealing to me. Probably the reason we don't get more follow-through and introspection, and why I kinda understand the audience feeling shortchanged, albeit for different reasons for me. I think they're looking for the drama, I'm looking for insight. Of course, the other factor in all of this is the production and the instrumentation. For minus her frequent co-writers Taylor Parks and Victoria Monet, Ariana Grande leans a lot more on Max Martin and Ilya, the latter of whom didn't work on Positions but's been involved in all her previous albums, and man, I'm not sure that was the right choice here. For starters, this album is easily her shortest, and it feels like her shortest. Mostly because it is, by and large, a full-on pop album in comparison with the slower R&B cuts, which I honestly think Eternal Sunshine could have used. There's a considerable amount of heartbreak and angst that could have afforded more space to breathe, really marinate in the drama that you don't really get here. And when you pair that with a much more muted vocal delivery, the very economical structure of this project, it creates the impression, likely an unfair one, of hitting benchmarks efficiently. Get in, get out. Quell any sort of lingering drama, or at the very worst, damage control. Now, is that remotely fair? No. I think another very real possibility is the emotions are too raw to be fully explored at this time, but it's been 4 years since Positions, her longest gap between albums, and your A-list pop stars are not always afforded the luxury of time in a streaming and TikTok economy. Made all the worse by not even having TikTok promo this time around. But let's be real, I can also say it's not exactly top tier from Max Martin in terms of composition or production. His beats that lean on trap, like on the self-titled, they always felt kind of weedy and awkwardly mastered. And well, as much as I'm increasingly convinced that Yes and might have been the worst possible choice as a mediocre lead-off single and a complete misread of the vibes and situation, at least with its competent throwback house speed and the Madonna interpolation on your Messy Divorce album, I can imagine someone in that boardroom thinking why it would work. But let's be real, I'm not wild about the buzzy new disco shuffle of Bye. The twinkle around Don't Want to Break Up Again has this weirdly chalky quality. The interpolation of The Boy Is Mine falls completely flat as it tries to split the difference of 3 different decades and sounds in R&B. And Imperfect for You, it attempts psychedelia with that off-key guitar and the lumbering groove and the very stilted vocal line, and I'm sorry, it's a total dud. All of these tracks could have used more air or space or mix depth to flesh out these textures and not feel as, well, shrink-wrapped. And it's kind of a shame because there are good pop ideas as well. I really love the smolder and supernatural paired with the ethereal vocals. The twinkle of I Wish I Hated You just nails the tragedy there, and the transition between the pulsating synth bass and the welling up of strings on We Can't Be Friends is really effective. Hell, I'll even stick up for the warped bassy punch of True Story that probably just needed a little bit more atmosphere or hookiness to really land, or maybe a little bit more grandiosity like on the closer Ordinary Things with the horns. It could have made it one hell of a closer, but that's the thing now, isn't it? Max Martin works best with anthemic songs that swing for the fences, where Ariana Grande using him as a composer for hire on smaller, messier pieces that demand more nuance, that's not the best use of your Max Martin, but she's comfortable with him. Which is also why the sound is no big leap either. This is comfort zone, for better or for worse. You can tell there was more focus on the content. But as a whole, look, I don't want to say this album is bad. I don't think it is. There is a floor of quality I normally expect with Ariana Grande. She is that talent, and it definitely doesn't have the duds that hold back Thank You Next for me, and I know I'm still in the minority who thinks it's comfortably her worst album. That hasn't changed. But this does feel like a rushed and intensely compromised album, where the stabs towards messy emotionality and nuance, they feel hamstrung by a producer who is better equipped for a different mood and sound, and writing where you can tell she's still parsing through the thick of it. Now, it's tempting to say that if Victoria Monet or Taylor Parks or more R&B writers in general were involved, the album would have leaned more on that genre, and that would have given her the grace and space to work through it all better. But honestly, I don't think it would have helped after Positions did not move the needle the way it should have for a variety of dumb reasons. And I gotta wonder, again, if there is industry meddling with this project. And it's relevant to bring up given how major albums like this are built. Ariana Grande has been out of mainstream pop for a couple of years now. Republic is gonna get antsy for something, she's an A-list act, and then catches her at a bad time to get something out, and it's gotta be pop friendly, and when she delivers a thornier project project that's a little difficult to promote. Her 12-carat toothache, if you want to go to a fellow Republic signee, they go with the obvious interpolation bait. They preemptively challenge the critics and the drama factories. They bait the reaction. And when that doesn't really hit, after they pull up the Mariah Carey remix card, they throw up their hands because their parent label's locked in a pissing contest with the most valuable source of their own promo. But again, while this album is compositionally structured for TikTok, Ariana Grande's been on that wave for a while, the mess doesn't really fit well with that platform's demographics or proclivities. This is subdued, it's trying to be more emotionally mature, it demands some complexity in its reading, which gives me the thought that it actually might age better than some might expect. As it is, I just think there are too many elements working at cross purposes for me to say it fits among her best, and not all of them are even her fault, but there is enough quality I can endorse. It's good, I guess. And as for Ariana Grande, look, I don't think it solves her problems or wipes away her past memories by any means, but for what it does, I hope it's what she needed. If you're curious, it's worth a shot too. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, and subscribe. Again, where this falls in Ariana Grande's canon might be a little bit polarizing. I've seen reviews that are all over the map with this. But hey, I'm curious where y'all fall. But now for that matter at hand, yes, I have a new couch. It's been long in coming. The previous couch I've had for about 12 years, the center cushion was all busted up. It really needed reupholstering, and sadly, to get it properly done, it would have cost me more than just get a new one that better fits the space anyway. I can do more in this space now. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if y'all want to help support the channel, this was not cheap, or go beyond that and help me argue with me more directly on my Discord, or hell, just want to get albums on my schedule going forward, link to my Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated at all. Tough times. I'll be okay. But hey, options available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.